In this video, look into the options by which we can communicate between a Raspberry Pi and a cell phone. Option 1 is to use the same Wi-Fi, which is what you do when you connect all devices to your home router. Option 2 is when you don't have admin privileges or control over the router, or both devices are connected to different networks or different Wi-Fi. And they could be in different locations, different cities, or even different countries. Option 3 is when you don't have any external Wi-Fi to connect to, but you will have to turn on your cell phone's hotspot, and you actually don't need data at all for this process. You can do this independent of having data or not having data on your mobile device. And for all of these options, we need to have Vnc app installed on your phone. So let's get started. I turned the Raspberry Pi on. On my computer, I'm gonna open Vnc Viewer. Since I'm at home and the Raspberry Pi recognizes the home network, I'm gonna click on the shortcut for the Pi's home connection. So this is a screen of the Raspberry Pi casted on my computer. On my phone, I'm gonna look for Vnc Viewer app and install it. Open the app and watch the hints. Click on next all the way till you get started. Sign in with your Vnc credentials. In the address book, you'll find two connections. One for the direct connection from home and another if they are on different networks. I'm gonna use any of them at home. They both should work. Enter the login information for the Raspberry Pi. You will get some hints on how to control your Raspberry Pi from your phone. I can run anything directly on the Raspberry Pi and I can see what is happening on the phone. I'll now try to control the Raspberry Pi from my phone by clicking and interacting from my phone. And I will see what is happening on the Pi on the right screen. Since I don't have a mouse or a keyboard connected directly to my phone, I found it a little bit hard to control the Raspberry Pi with my phone. But that is good enough for me if I want to monitor a process that is running on the Raspberry Pi, or if I want to start an application or a program, check log, and few small tasks. Your phone now acts as an extra monitor for your Raspberry Pi. Now I'm gonna shut down the Pi, and I will do this from my phone. I now accomplished option 1 or option 2, depending on the networks you're working around and the task you have at hand. In the next few minutes, I'm gonna set up my Raspberry Pi and my phone to accomplish option number 3 without using data or external Wi-Fi. This is my computer screen. I'm gonna power up the Raspberry Pi. I'll open Vnc Viewer app. I had several devices and several connections I used in the past. This is the one I used when I connected the Raspberry Pi to my home network. This is the one I used when I'm on any network. Since I'm currently at home and the Raspberry Pi is at home and it's powered on, I'm going to use this. This is actually going to be faster. And here is my screen of the Raspberry Pi. This is my phone. I'm going to turn off Wi-Fi and data. I'll go to settings. I'll scroll up or down till I find connections. I'll choose the connections. I want to turn mobile hotspot on, so it's here. Turn mobile hotspot. Click on that again after you turned it on. Give your hotspot a name, also known as SSID. Mine, I called it Morgan's. Give it a password. Currently, I have no devices connected. My Raspberry Pi is still connected to the local network. I'm going to give it a few minutes till the other network appears. Now I see my new mobile hotspot I created. I'm going to click on that and enter the credentials I just created on my phone to connect to my phone. You're going to lose connection here because now this is not connected through the home network. So although I lost the connection from my computer to the Raspberry Pi, I now can see under my phone, I can see the network I created, the mobile hotspot. I can see Raspberry Pi 2 is actually connected to my phone. I'm going to click on the name of the Raspberry Pi here. I'll now take a note of that IP address that is associated with the Raspberry Pi 2. This is managed now by my phone. My phone is the router and issue this address to this Raspberry Pi. Although I cannot see it here on my computer, but I'm gonna see now from my router, which is my phone actually. I'm gonna connect it to this Raspberry Pi shortly. Hit OK, just take a note of that number. I'll now go to the main screen of my phone. I'm gonna click on Vnc Viewer. I'm going to click on the plus to add a new connection. I'm going to type in the IP address that I got and I'm going to give it a name. I called it Raspberry Pi 2 Direct. Create. Connect. It'll ask you for the credentials of that specific Raspberry Pi. Type in the username and the password for that Pi. You can remember passwords if you want to. Continue. And here is a screen of the Raspberry Pi. Now I have a direct connection to the Raspberry Pi. I can control it. I can monitor any process. I don't have an internet on my phone through data or through Wi-Fi. But I can go to the mall, just me, the Pi, and the phone, and I can go connected to a Wi-Fi any other place and I would have access to internet. But now without internet, I'm still seeing the Pi and I can control it. But I will shut down the Pi for now. We managed to accomplish this task. Now the cell phone is a hotspot. Even though we don't have data, we don't have internet, but we are able to connect it to Raspberry Pi because this is now the router and it issues IP address to the Pi, and we use this IP address through VNC from the phone to connect to the Pi and control it. So I presented different options of how to connect your Raspberry Pi to a phone and cast its screen to the phone and use the phone to control the Raspberry Pi. And the options vary based on what networks you currently have or you want to connect to. The proximity between the Raspberry Pi and the phone, are they in the same place or far apart? Whether you need an internet or not. But eventually you got an extra monitor for your Raspberry Pi. You don't have a keyboard and a mouse, but some people actually connect a keyboard and a mouse to a Raspberry Pi. Through USB or even through Bluetooth. You can do the same thing with a phone as well. But for me, I don't use this connection to do any typing. I use this to control or see what is happening on the Raspberry Pi. I can invoke a process, a program to run, check the log files and status of applications and few other things.